Welcome to Unemployed and Afraid, a podcast that explores the glorious mess of building your own business with the people doing it. I'm your host and fellow business builder, Kim Curtin. Thank you for being here. Let's get into some good, honest, small business chat. If you've been building an e-commerce business, it's likely you're already familiar with my guest today. But if you're not, and if it's the first time you're hearing from Lisa Jones, let me tell you, you're going to love this conversation. It feels like a deeply nourishing coaching session and, quite frankly, a little bit of a kick in the bum. You're going to hear about becoming an entrepreneur when you're surrounded by employees, being careful who you let into your dreams, how just thinking about building a business works to prepare you, learning to pivot on the edge of a toenail, letting go of the idea that your business will stay the same, the shadow of money worries, and building a business that exists outside of you. We get into some deeply personal spaces, and I'm so grateful to Lisa for all that she shares in this episode with me and for letting the conversation go into some really supportive territories. So let's get into it. With me today is Lisa Jones, founder and CEO of Shecom, the largest and fastest growing community for female-founded direct-to-consumer brand owners in the world, supporting a community of over 20,000 women with live events, awards, retreats, and mentoring programs. Naturally, then, it will be no surprise that Lisa is also an e-commerce expert and mentor, author, podcast host, keynote speaker, and MC. She has founded 7 businesses in the last 14 years, a serial entrepreneur, if you will, building 3 multi-million-dollar brands in her career, selling and exiting 2, and now busy scaling the 3rd with the brand Shecom to a global empire. Featured across Forbes, Smart Company, Inside Small Business, and more, Lisa talks about the future of e-commerce, tackling business growth without burnout, mastering website conversions, and the wisdom and triumphs from trailblazing women. But it's Lisa's personal experience of building her business and being a trailblazing woman that we're going to hear all about today. And I am sure she's got a few stories to tell about the chaos of it all. Lisa, welcome to Unemployed and Afraid.
Oh, thank you, Kim. What a pleasure to be here.
It is absolutely my pleasure. I have been looking forward to speaking to you for weeks, and not just because we had to reschedule thanks to solopreneur tech life issues on my end.
They catch us all. Technology for every woman or person listening to this podcast will be a common feature, I'm sure.
It's good fun. It's good fun, the stuff we deal with. But before we get into all of that, I would actually love to know how, if we can think about who this person might be for a moment, your best friend, how they would describe you.
Oh, my goodness. Okay, there's probably a couple of common features. One would be generous to a fault. And I mean to a fault because I have a habit of being too generous. For example, every time I go out for dinner, whether it be my family or my team or my friends, I pretty much always race them to the counter to pay. So that's like one of my features. But equally and maybe disturbingly, they would also say, and it might just be the thing they put on my gravestone, doesn't suffer fools. And that makes me a bit unique because I'm both generous and also can't deal with dickheads or people who just literally do stupid stuff. I have no tolerance for things that I guess I have a short attention span and a short patience level is how they might also describe me. Contradictions in and themselves.
Very relatable as a quite the fiery Aries on this end. I can spot a dickhead a mile away.
Oh. And also like systems in businesses or, like waiting too long for a coffee. And then I see there's like one barista at a like 3-person barista coffee machine. And then she's standing there looking out the window. And I just want to go in there and put her hand on the machine and say, make my coffee. Like I can't stand it. Inefficiencies drive me mental.
When I first left Sydney and moved regional, I was in Tasmania before up here in the Sunshine Coast. And I used to wait at a beautiful cafe, seaside, east coast of Tasmania, really beautiful and slow and relaxing. I'd be waiting for my chai. And I would just be like, sweet mother of Christ, why is this taking so long? I have no energy for this. Everyone is so relaxed.
My husband has a nickname for me and it's the fidget spinner, an inability to sit still on every level.
All right. Well, I will definitely not intro you as a fidget spinner when I go and do my pre-promote. Maybe I will. But let's get back to the Lisa you were before taking that first step into your first entrepreneurial moment. Who were you then and what were you doing?
Look, I was the good girl and the high achiever. And I suppose I need to preface that period of about 15 years of my life where I achieved pretty big corporate success by saying that I was also a complete failure in high school. As many business owners are, I didn't understand high school, and my parents felt that the best education for me was a very exclusive, expensive private girls' school, which pretty much soul crushed me. And equally to the complete toxic bitchiness of, 1,000 girls at a school was the concept that I had to be a high achiever in a scholastic sense. And it made no sense to me in my brain whatsoever. And I felt through the entire schooling system that I was really dumb because I just didn't understand what they expected of me. And interestingly, in my early to mid 20s, I decided to take a leap and go to uni. And I discovered when I was at uni that I'm actually really smart. I was getting high distinctions in all my subjects. And it was because I was allowed to approach it in my own style without the high school teachers all over me. And I think that probably started about 15 years of my life where I felt like I needed to be a really high achiever in a corporate sense. So I worked my way up many corporate ladders, very much employee mentality, but secretly waking at 4 a.m. every morning, dreaming about having my own small business. And for me, that was actually a food business. I've dreamed my entire life about a Vietnamese hole in the wall, making my Vietnamese drip iced coffees and my banh mi's and having, cool man bun guys in aprons and little Vietnamese lanterns and make it very chic, but a food business. And of course, people who have food businesses know they don't make a lot of money. So I was always too scared to make the jump from corporate life to that. And well, that was pretty much where I met my ex-husband, who was my journey into entrepreneurship.
I'm just visualizing you at the Vietnamese restaurant doing your thing.
Oh, I had menus designed. I had, I would go to all the food markets thinking about how I could start at a food market because that's your test and measure period. And it was a real thing for me. But I come from a lot, and look, listeners will relate to this, but I come from a long line of employee family members. And there's definitely a feeling amongst my tribe that you work for the man, you don't go out on your own. And that makes it very difficult and perhaps almost unnavigable to consider throwing it all in and going to be entrepreneurial. And I sometimes bemoan the fact that I wasn't born in an entrepreneurial family, because if I was at the age of 16 or 17, I would have launched my very first business and perhaps I'd be like a billionaire by now because I'm 20 years behind anyone else at that point in my journey.
Oh, it's so funny, isn't it? The systems or the proximity in which we have to those who build a business makes such a big difference. And what we're able to be exposed to, those we're expanded by, just that alone can really shift the trajectory of somebody's life. It's a huge part of why I created this podcast, was because I needed to have, the kinds of conversations that could encourage me to push forward. It's proximity plays such a role.
Oh, and I think we need to talk about that for a red hot moment, because I feel like even now I'm very careful about whom I choose to share my business strategies and ideas and, problems with, because we can be so conflicted and, run down by people around us if they aren't on the same path as us about what we're building. And I think a lot of people, and I find this inside my community, and I'm sure your listeners will relate to this, but if you have people around you who are a bit negative Nancy about your own business experience and, oh, why you put all your, mortgage money into that stupid business, it's never going to work. Like, it's difficult for us to really back ourselves when we've got negative Nancy's around us. And it's, thank God, whilst my parents, and they're very much of an employee mentality, they finally, after like a very, very long time of watching me bust my ass, are like, you've got this, girl. And so I'm a bit careful about whom I share my inner circles, though. And I think the listeners need to do the same. You've got to be quite definitely distinctive about who's allowed in to share that.
Oh, I couldn't agree more. And, whilst we can always, kind of push it away that it comes from love, and in so many circumstances it does come from love, it can also come from that unconscious projection of what
100%.
that person isn't doing.
Because let's be honest, it's the title of your podcast, but I live in fear a lot. And I know a lot of my community live in fear. And it's something we learn to navigate and accept that it's just part of the entrepreneurial journey, is that what if I don't have enough money to pay my bills this month? And it doesn't matter whether I'm doing $5,000 a month or, $1 million a month revenue. It's the same feeling, and it's debilitating. So the very last thing you need is somebody else to project their fear onto you as well. My husband and I, we have this really funny thing where we have to be in different anxiety cycles, because the minute one of us goes into anxiety, it spins the other one into one, because I'm like, oh my God, here's my rock. And if he's not okay, then what, am I not meant to be okay right now? And we literally had this conversation yesterday. So it's a reminder, be careful who you let into your inner circle.
My lovely partner, he's a psychologist, and he's just in the final stages of, he had a life change himself and became a psychologist in the final stages of now. So he practices a lot with me. And if I ever see him kind of drop out in the moment and be a little nervous, I'm like, oh fuck, everything's really bad, isn't it?
Totally. It's an absolutely a thing.
Well, before we tangent too much on that, which I would really love to just dine out on that, because, fear, growth, it is so it's in the same party, it's in the same house, it's still doing its own thing. But getting you from that moment, which I think is really powerful and really interesting, to even go through the act of thinking about what could this business have? What could it look like? What could it do? I think that is such a powerful experience for so many people to go through, to like envision it but not act on it. It plays a part into so many of the next things that you do for so many of us. But how did you then take the step, and what did you step into when you went, you know what, this is the one I'm going to try for now?
Yeah, well, interestingly, and again, I'm sure listeners will nod their heads in the story that I tell, but I think probably I never would have been brave enough to do it. Maybe I feel like what I learned from that, firstly, before we go into how I did become a solo, unemployed, if you like, or unemployable for sure, because I could never work for anyone again. But I feel that what I did in that 10 years or so, where I really deeply dreamt about my own businesses, is I learned about minimum viable product. And I did a lot of work around test and measuring, like, is there a market for this? What would they pay for it? What would my margins look like? How would I get my raw costs down? How could I amp this up? Is it scalable? Like, I played a lot with a lot of those topics. And I think the silver lining behind never being gutsy enough to launch it, but researching it deeply, is that I spent a long time analyzing those pieces. And that's served me incredibly well since then, that skill set. However, what happened for me is a cataclysmic meeting of somebody else in my life. I was in a pretty significant corporate career, best salary of my life, worked my way up the ladder. I spent years working overseas for big international property companies. I was pretty high up the ladder as a commercial property valuer / chartered surveyor, they call them in the UK, and hated my life, was miserable. I was surrounded by a bunch of deadbeats who were not my people whatsoever. They were all analytical property boys, and I was really out of my depth. They were not my people. I knew that, but I also didn't know what next. And then I met this guy online dating and fell in love very quickly, and he had a small business. And I instantly turned my business acumen that I'd been cultivating for 10 years over to help him with his business. And within 3 months of meeting him, I'd quit my job that I hated and moved into his tiny apartment where we ran it out of his lounge room. And that was my first then $3 million a year business that I basically built alongside of him. And that is will come up as a theme throughout this podcast interview, because that was both the best thing I'd ever done and the worst thing I've ever done, because that marriage is no longer part of my world. But that did give me the guts to jump ship and very much then be all in. That was a solar heart dealership. So we had a solar heart territory, and we sold energy efficient pool pumps and rainwater tanks and roof insulation. And really that was the eco rebates that were around and pretty prevalent 10, 15 years ago. And that did build up into a really big business. But that's the one I say I made all the mistakes in. Did everything literally textbook wrong. And that's where I learned how bad that can feel.
Wow. I mean, I really remember that time. You've just really taken me back. I remember when there was I think I was as a salesperson in radio early in my sales career, and I'm pretty sure I had quite a lot of clients that were in that field at the time that were advertising on radio, because it was quite a sort of like a boom period for that business. And yeah, I can imagine that it was pretty intense at times. Is it safe to say that there was a time that boom started to pull back and things had to start getting a little bit more serious?
Oh, and that's the thing about business, I believe. The answer to that is yes. I'll tell you about one defining moment in a second. But the thing that's really interesting in looking back at business stories is we learn so much. There is always silver linings. And I always say to my community, there's no such thing as a mistake unless you repeat it. The thing about a mistake is it's actually just a lesson. And what we learn from that lesson to never do it again, and to learn and pivot from that. And my my moment was, a team of 19, and they turned a rebate off, but instead of giving us a 6 or 12-month runway for the rebate turning off, they gave us 30 days that it was going to turn off.
Nice.
And we lived, unfortunately, in that period of my life, always on the next month's credit. So we had, $300,000 or $400,000 a month in invoices for solar systems, but we had to use this month's revenue to pay last month's bill, which is often normal what happens in stock heavy stock cost businesses. And of course, when you suddenly realize you only have a month of revenue left, it's pretty diabolically bad. And I talk about that period in my life as learning to pivot on the edge of a toenail. So the idea being that every time you come up against a brick wall, you have to like turn on the edge of your toenail and run in another direction. And I remember hyperventilating on the floor. We had one of those mezzanine offices and I had team downstairs and we had the office upstairs, my ex-husband and I. And I remember just lying on this carpeted floor, like holding my stomach and hyperventilating, thinking we're fucked. Like fucked, fucked, fucked. I hope I can swear on this podcast, by the way.
Absolutely.
Of course, we were, but we weren't. We navigated our way through it. But that was a very defining moment in my business journey from the perspective of understanding that we always have to be prepared to know how to turn on the edge of our toenail.
I love that. We were, but we weren't. I think that is something I've just written down and taken out of that because I think that is so often the experience where it's like, yeah, we are fucked, but we're also not fucked. And it's just what you do with that. That and I'm trying not to think too much about pivoting on a toenail because you know that like feeling you get when you think about fingernails and toenails.
It's like a blackboard, right?
Oh,
sorry. Yeah.
But it is very, very reminiscent and very on point of that feeling that you have to do when you move and you have to move quickly and you have to make change and you don't even know how and where the energy is going to come from and which to do it and what even the first step is. But it's just one little thing every time.
Well, and I think it set me up really well in life for understanding that in business, no matter the size of your team, I have 36 in my team now at SheCom, which is pretty significant fortnightly payroll, I can tell you. But it definitely has, I've had to pivot on the edge of a toenail many times. And in fact, I've just done it this year in SheCom as well. And I think it's about a few things if I was to summarize it. One is also a letting go of ego, because I think as a business owner, I feel as an entrepreneur or a femme entrepreneur myself, sometimes we can get attached to an outcome and we can't be. If we're going to turn on the edge of a toenail, we have to let go of ego, of the idea that just because I said it was going to be this business, it doesn't mean it has to stay that business. And I've had to really kill an ego this year in order to pivot the business back into a more profitable, wholesome business model. And I think if I really analyze the really successful business women I interview all the time, it's a common theme, the ability for us to die an ego and rebuild a business every year or two when it needs a complete overhaul. And they're the ones that survive. And I regularly speak to businesses where I can see them dying. And I recognize in that they haven't done that. They haven't been able to turn on the edge of their toenail and reinvent. And there's a really clear piece here that listeners could take from that is that like, when was the last time I did this and when should I do it next? And die a death of ego and completely overhaul my business and say, does this serve me anymore? Is this the right business model for me? Is this the right business for my avatar customers who I need to spend money with me to make it a business? And if it's not, where are those people that are going to pay me money and how do I pivot?
Because there are always people that will pay us money. And that's always the thing, that scarcity sensation that is so easy to lean into. But I really love that you took us there specifically to that feeling, I think that is so universal where you publicly talk about one thing and publicly can be large scale, big PR, if you're building a profile and you're kind of out there saying one thing and presenting one thing, right down to small telling friends, family, or, putting it on your LinkedIn or putting it on your socials, like whatever it is. Then having to think, okay, so I might need to do a change, but that means I have to talk about it. How do I talk about a change? Is there like a post that's going to announce that I'm shifting into this new space and why? And like we delve so deeply into that space thinking that people actually give a shit, first of all, and that forgetting that moment where profile or perception is built on a tiny, tiny little thing over and over and over again. And a person puts in their mind who they think you are anyway. We never really can completely control what it looks like out to everybody else. We make it such a big deal.
Oh, we do, because we have that this is the ego piece again. And if we let go of that, people adapt way quicker than we think they do. And I remember specifically when I let go of my ex-husband's name, I was keen to let that go. And I got remarried and I had to go through this rebranding process. I was Lisa Lang and then I was going to be Lisa Jones. And I was terrified that it was going to destroy my following or my audience. And I built it into a thing, and not a huge thing, but it's still a thing. And we rebranded behind the scenes. And then there was a moment I turned it all live and I was so worried, but literally no one gave a shit. There was zero. They just pivoted and were like, well, you're Lisa Jones. I was like, oh my God, they don't care. Literally couldn't care less.
Oh, you're so right, Lisa. I was a ceramicist 2 years ago. It's and that was, a flash. I mean, I would still make ceramics. I love them; they're fantastic. But I randomly decided to become a ceramicist after I left a 13-year career in corporate media and commercial media, and decided to do that. And then I was like, no, I don't want to sell to consumers ceramics anymore. If I make them, I'm making them for me and my friends. And this is, I know what I want to do as a business now. It's a complete, like, there's small and then there's like complete 180s. They all feel the same and really no one cares.
Well, the thing I think is interesting is perhaps it wasn't entirely true that no one gave a shit, but what I think it is that people are interested and inherently voyeuristic and curious. So maybe what I should have said was that it didn't bother them in the slightest, but they were interested and happy for me in the change. And I think it's probably the same with a ceramicist or not a ceramicist. They will be interested in that if you portray it in an interesting way, i.e., behind the scenes, like bringing them on the journey and storytelling your transition. They would love to follow along with that and be part of it. And I think the more, let me say, I guess, that the moral obligation for us as podcasters and as people who have followings is that we do stay very real and keep it real. And it's okay to change our mind next week. And then I just tell people, right, I got that wrong. Here's what I actually think, or here's what I learned. And people love that. A bit of humility and a bit of behind the scenes storytelling. It's a real opportunity for us to take people on our journey and to get them to, I say it isn't just enough to know, like, and trust someone. You need to fall in love with them a little. And I think that in the best possible sense, that's what I try and do with my audience, is let them in, not all the way in, because that's just icky when you're married and you've got kids, but enough in that they can decide if they not just like, know and trust me, but maybe crush me a little, like I crush others a little in that space. I think it's really important.
I spotted one of my business friends on the socials this morning. In fact, she inspired an entire episode that I'm about to record once we hang up, which I wasn't going to do. But yeah, those people you crush on do, like, they provide inspiration, they provide growth, they provide that space. But yeah, you will notice that you're never quite all the way in. So we do need to apply that to ourselves as well.
I do want to say though, and I think that we've got to be really careful though on whom we crush on. And I say that because there was a conversation I had this morning with somebody on Messenger. I'm not going to say who it was, but there's quite a prominent female e-commerce leader whom a lot of people look up to. And I know some stuff behind the scenes where they shouldn't. And I don't say anything because I'm never one to bring anyone else down. But I think that sometimes there are women, or just in general people, who portray a certain persona on socials, but actually that isn't really whom they are behind the scenes. So we do actually have to be a little bit reticent about how many people we crush on or whom we crush on, because they hold an unrealistic candle up of thinking that I can have everything and I am really amazing and you could be this too, but actually they're not really that at all. It's just a mirage. So I don't know how you navigate that. I suppose you have to develop and hone finally your bullshitting ability skills, but it's definitely a thing. Be a little bit careful about whom you follow.
Social media has taught us a really funny lesson, hasn't it? It's like, it seems to have taken away a little bit of critical thinking. I'll speak from, myself, like, in the moment, critical thinking is really hard. But then when you take a step away from it and you're like, hang on a minute, like something feels, like, how does that, if this feels so different to who I am and what my life is like, maybe there's a reason I'm feeling that way. But also I'm all about just putting ourselves on pedestals and just like, I don't know if you do this, but I love to reflect on like what I was doing a year ago, or just how I felt about myself a year ago, how I showed up in the mirror, how I dressed or presented, or the words that I said, the feedback that I was getting. I love to look at that and then look at today and go, oh, cool, I'm going to crush on myself a little bit here. Like that's I'm not where I want to be, but I am so much further along than I was before.
My husband and I, we have a really cute thing we do, which is exactly what you're saying. But we have a routine in my home, and I'm a like 4 a.m. waker. It's a chronic thing for me. I'm just a ridiculously stupid, happy early bird. I can wake and I'm instantly on. But you get me past 7:30 at night, and I'm almost comatose. I'm just not a night person. Anyway, what we do every morning is we walk on the beach by about 5 a.m. We take our dogs down, we swim, we walk, and then we have a coffee. We always go to the same coffee shop, and it's everything. To be honest with you, it's one of my favorite moments in the day. But my husband and I, we sit with our coffees and our wet dogs and big smiles on our face in the sunshine. Obviously in winter, it's a little bit trickier to have a smile, but it's our morning routine. But the piece that's interesting is that most mornings we'll show each other what we were doing on the same date as today, a year ago or 2 years ago in our photos on iPhones, because you can go look at the year and then it instantly takes you to the same date a year ago, look at 2 years ago, 3 years ago. So we often pick up our phones and say, look where we were a year ago. Oh, what about 2 years ago? Holy shit, 3 years ago. My God, how far have we come? Like, I think that's a really easy, beautiful way to remind ourselves of exactly what you just expressed.
I love that. Okay, this might be a new little ritual I'm going to do with my other half. If you've been telling yourself that next year, the proverbial next year, is the year that you'll launch your podcast as part of a powerful content strategy to drive connection and impact for your business, let's make 2025 the actual year together. Every great show starts with a seed idea, a conversation you want to have, or a need you want to fulfill for a type of listener. But the shows that connect with an audience and bring you business results are the ones with staying power. They're backed with a strong strategic thinking custom to the specific nuances of the podcast medium, the one you're listening to right now, plus brand and content marketing knowledge. I can deliver this for you. It's me, of course, your host, Kim Curtin, and I can deliver this for you. If you've been connecting with me here on this show for more than a minute, you'll already know how passionate I am about podcasts and that I'm a skilled podcast strategist with over 15 years in media, creating strategic branded content concepts across broadcast and podcast. And I want to help you create a podcast concept that you are excited about and that will deliver for your business. I've opened access to a special one-on-one podcast strategy session with me for the first time ever to refine and stress test your idea, discuss what will work and what to watch out for, and how to measure your success and anything else that you might need to feel confident in this exciting podcast medium. It's 60 minutes, one-to-one, and $199. All you have to come prepared with is a seed idea, no matter how small, and together we'll form this into a show concept that you'll be proud to pursue. Interested? I'll make sure that the link is available for you in the About section of this podcast, or you can head straight to goodsideofthebed.com.au to check it out, or just come and find me on LinkedIn and I'll deliver it directly to your inbox. And I hope to see you there, and I hope to see you creating a podcast you're proud of for your business in 2025. So you kind of alluded to it before, and I want to go there with you because, again, like before we even hit record, we talked about how many stories I could try to get out of you today in the short time that we have about, Eco Originals, of course, a huge business that you developed and exited from. And, there's just so much to your story, but you alluded specifically to SheCom and the need to shift, I'm putting words in your mouth here, but shift like revenue modeling or shift the way in which that you structure the business. Can you take me to that space of where you were and the moment in which you realized something had to change?
Sure, no worries. I haven't super publicly shared this too much, but I'm really happy to chat about it. As always, I'm an open book. I mentioned right at the start of the podcast that I'm generous to a fault, and I think that became one of my pieces here over the last 3 years with SheCom is I wanted to be everything to everyone, and that's both employing as many beautiful women as I could and serving as many beautiful women as I could, and that meant I would keep adding more things to what we did. So it was like it wasn't just enough to start with mentoring programs. Then I needed retreats, and then we needed awards, and then we needed events, and then we needed to beat everyone else's events with our own stands because we needed to pull our women together. And we've done something like 16 events this year in 2024, and it literally has nearly killed me. So every time we run an event, it's the whole team has to scurry. We have to market it. We have to, staff it, fly everyone in. We have to have, props, stands, microphones, speeches, guest lists, attendees. Like, it's a very big undertaking. And unfortunately for me, that has a ramification, not only on my home. So my daughter's always like, Mom, you're never present. You're always on your phone. They call me thumbs because I'm always putting out fires on my phone. First moment I wake up, last moment I go to bed. But it extends to my team. They're also then doing the same. At 5 a.m., we're all bantering and they're not present with their kids. And unfortunately, we added, fortunately, I suppose, a second revenue stream to what we do here at SheCom, which is corporate partners, as well as our ladies that we earn revenue from. And well, that just added a whole other wheelhouse of neediness of having to deliver on a corporate level now. And so my team kept growing and growing and growing. And it became a beast that needed to be fed. And then the minute that sales would have a recovery period where we weren't running around launching things or selling things, the beast would just eat all the profit. And so I feel like I created a monster in my ridiculous generosity of being everything to everyone. And I really deeply, from about July this year, had to look at, I didn't even like my business anymore because it had become this monster. And it also brought insane amounts of stress of having to deliver constantly to everybody. And that brought massive waves of anxiety and fear and lack and prosperity and abundance issues back into my head. And I had a sinking stomach constantly because I was constantly worried about selling enough tickets to this or selling that, or this partner isn't happy, or it literally was a beast that was like a big, I call it the 12th monkey syndrome, where you've got 11 monkeys jumping on your shoulders, demanding stuff from you. But the minute that 12th tiny little monkey jumps up, you collapse under the weight of it. And I've collapsed this year. And so did a lot of my team. I burnt some team. I also equally built up my team this year. We changed out a whole bunch of team that had not had the skill set to take us through the next millions of revenue layers that we were hitting, and brought much higher level team on. So that is actually a really horrible thing to go through, letting go of team and hiring new team in the period in which you've got to train new team up and build new systems and SOPs. And we onboarded an entire new software platform that runs our business now this year. And so all of those things this year have literally meant that I fucking hated my business this year. And I think that's the bit that I really want to be really clear about, is when you get into a position not only where you're not making the money and having constant worry about money, but you actually don't like what you do, dude, you need to change something pretty significant. So when I peeled it all away and did a lot of 4 a.m. manifestos to my team about the new approach and had some incredible mentor women in my life who helped me strip stuff away and look at it, we've completely rebuilt it in the last 6 months, and it's rocking. Like, it rocks the Casbah. It's easy, it's simple. We're serving the people that we know we can serve. It's profitable, it's growing, it's really exciting. And so it feels good again. But I will say, since I'm on a roll, you can ask me questions in a moment, Kim, when I give you a moment to answer. But I will say that the PTSD from having money worries, it lingers for a really long time. I mean, I have PTSD on a bunch of levels. I was in a domestic violence marriage for a long time that gave me extreme levels of PTSD, but fear about not being able to pay your bills, that sinks deep into a woman's psyche and her cells and her, all parts of her. And I find myself, my team are like, dude, this is the most exciting thing ever. Look at our wins. And I'm like, finding myself struggling to celebrate the wins yet. I feel like it's like that house of cards. If someone blows too hard, I'm not sure if we're quite there yet. And that, I've talked about it on the beach with my husband this morning. That's a problem. But, that's something I'll have to navigate.
Well, firstly, please don't ever worry. Like, this is your forum. I am here to support your story sharing. The listener knows that this is like, you can talk and talk and talk and talk. And I am so happy to listen, because that is what we're here to do. So, and I think it's a really generous share. So thank you for sharing it. I know that it's not always easy to really get into that stuff. That is what we exist to do here, to show the listener that we all go through different things and have to make massive changes. And that comes with a lot of soul searching. You probably saw, because of course we're on video here, you probably saw as soon as you talked about the deep cell feeling of fear around money, my shoulders went up. I saw it happen. I was like, no, relax. Because that's a really prominent feeling that I've been dealing with for a lot of time, and I think most business owners deal with for most months. It's just a reality. And then feast or famine is so much of what happens in this gig.
It is, but then I feel that the problem is that it pervades and it creates that PTSD reaction where it's difficult then to feel the highs. So I am very cognizant that, well, firstly, my belief is Walt Disney sold us a bloody terrible lie when we were little. So I grew up in the era of Rapunzel, let down your hair, and, all of this Cinderella stuff where the prince is going to come along and it's happily ever after. So I believe on some level that I can only speak for myself, but I was default driven to this idea that we should always be happy. And I think whenever I'm not happy, I then assume there's something deeply wrong. But what I try and teach my daughter is there are highs and lows, and they're both necessary, because if we don't have lows, we don't know what the highs are. The problem, I think, for a lot of people who may be listening now will resonate with this, but the problem is that when you've had extreme lows, it kind of can cloud the highs where we don't feel like we can celebrate the highs because we're worried the lows might come rushing back really quickly. And I feel for a lot of people, that's the fear about money. It could be all kinds of different things will set that off, but it most definitely is the flapping bird in the belly. It's the monkeys on the shoulders. It's the constriction. I get it even on a muscular level where my muscles get really tight and I literally have to go and have massages to try and osteos to try and unwind. It's why I go to Bali twice a year, 3, 4 times a year sometimes. And I'm going for a month in January, just literally to have a massage every day so that I can get that fucking feeling out of my body.
I get a funny little reminder every night of the tension building a business brings when I have to put in my ocular splint. I think that's the right term for it, but it's like a mouth guard that like protects my teeth because I crunch and I grind and I get that pain in my jaw. I'm like, stop it, like stop the tension. So I get a nice little reminder every night when I pop in my my little mouth guard and can't say the word jigsaw puzzle to my partner.
And this is what I say to a lot of women too, is like it isn't for everyone. Like I want to be really clear about that. I feel that there's a lot of people that aspire to be self-employed and it sometimes the cost is too great. And I say to people, if it feels at any point, and you should check in on yourself weekly on this, if at any point it feels too great, it's okay to go back and be employed again by somebody else because that might feel safer on your nervous system or on your family's income. Like you've got to do your duty, which is making sure there's always enough money to pay for what your home needs at its base root level. You don't want to go backwards financially where it becomes something that can destroy your family or your home. And it's never good to go into that space. And I've been really close to that many times. So I speak from deep experience that it's okay to say, this isn't for me. I know for me, I can never be employed again. I just know I'm not employable anymore because I see things and I behave and interrelate into a business in a way that only a CEO or an owner of a business could see and behave. And I think that, might make me a liability to someone else because I might be like, dude, you're a fucking dickhead and you shouldn't do it that way. So what can I say? I think that some of us have this innate ability to only really drive their own business models after a certain point in life. And that's okay too.
Absolutely, absolutely. I mean, you never know, the right person might really love that, but it's just, I can imagine that'll bring up quite a few awkward moments. Looking on the outside, of course, like direct to consumer, e-commerce, some of the work and the businesses that you built before, so very different to what I'm looking at on the outside as like more of a community driven, in a sense, service model, I guess, community model, membership model, so very different to some of the things that you have done before in your past. What has that shift taught you?
Yeah, it's pretty interesting. I mean, it's taught me that it's difficult to navigate because I am an e-commerce expert and I mentor and coach in e-commerce, but my current multi-million dollar brand is actually a service business. You're 100% right. And sometimes I actually have moments of jealousy of other coaches who are coaches to coaches because I think, oh, you've got it so fucking easy. You just tell them what you do every day. Whereas my community don't care what I do every day in my business. I have to teach something entirely different, which means I'm running 2 simultaneous skill sets at the same time. And that is exhausting. So you're 100% right. I am building an empire that is a service empire, yet I'm teaching a product D2C, a set of skills. Now, I suppose what that's taught me is that, I guess I'm a very good multitasker, but it's also reminded me that I need mentorship in the space of which I'm building a business in. So I literally am off to LA on Monday to go and deep dive with a bunch of other high revenue level coaches because I then need to have aspirational people that I follow in the footsteps of for what I'm building at SheCom that's separate to all the conferences I go to that are D2C retail e-commerce related. So I navigate both is the answer to that. I have to have my feet firmly in both camps to be doing best practice on both.
That's an incredible point, and it's something I think important for us to remember that if we're finding ourselves in that sort of juxtaposition, it's like how do you nurture both sides? I think it's a really important takeaway. Now, this might be because there's something very prominent that I have just watched. It's a real recency bias here. I was watching the Martha Stewart documentary. I don't know if you've seen that.
I have actually.
Oh, what a ripper. God, I love that. For the listener as well who has seen it, I'm not going to spoiler alert anything, but there's this scene where it's a kind of pictures that, imagine Martha Stewart's cute little face on the screen, and there's, arms going off, and there's this business, this business, this business, this outlet, this outlet, this media, this media. But essentially what her business is it's Martha, a person, a human being at the core with a whole business built around it. I get that feeling with a business like Shecom, which is that, Shecom without you doesn't really seem to make sense. It's kind of built on you fronting up and showing up on podcasts like this with me, or producing your own, speaking on stages, raising your profile, doing all of that, right? And that is a lot about what our businesses, Martha Stewart scale, girl, yes, get it. Like, that's amazing. But, all the way down to a smaller scale where a coach is, selling off of their profile and putting themselves out there and, kind of being the center of their brand. I find this deeply interesting because it touches on a little bit of what we talked about, not letting people in too much, but having to show up every day, having to work on yourself, having to present yourself. Like, there's so much about being seen that I think is deeply interesting when you build a business around yourself. What has been your experience and your journey with, speaking, hosting, and being seen in general?
I love this question so much, by the way, Kim, because it's a very important topic to talk about. And yes, the Martha documentary both inspired and horrified me in equal measures. I think that I'm not doing a Martha. I'm going to be really frank. I actually identified really early on in Shecom, which is why it's not the Lisa Jones show. It's the Shecom show, is that key person risk is a problem when it comes to exiting a brand. And my whole team know we're building Shecom to exit. I have a few of my team who have employee shares in the business, and we're all building it to exit. And I don't want to be the face of Shecom. I'm actually really happy not to be. There's a big thing moving forward for me where we have 36 in our team, and a good portion of those are incredibly inspiring business women who work inside the business coaching other women that are all key faces. If you look at our website or our socials, there's a bunch of us who are the face of Shecom. And so that's me deliberately reducing the risk of exactly what brought Martha Stewart unstuck, which is that her ego made her the centerpiece. She never thought to bring anyone else in and around her to deviate away from. It's what made the IPO when they listed on the New York Stock Exchange. It made it very difficult for Martha because a lot of the savvy investors said there's a fucking risk here. If she gets hit by a bus, the whole thing tumbles. And of course, it wasn't a bus. It was a stupid FBI investigation that undid her, but it absolutely tumbled their stock price. And I don't want my business to be inhibited by my showing up or not showing up in the business. So I've deliberately built Shecom to be built by women for women, where it isn't the Lisa Jones dog and pony show. And my job then as the CEO for now is to continue to build and strategize and scale the business and make it eminently saleable one day. But at its core, you're right, it's a community. It's to support women. We take that very seriously. But it's also in equal measures next year of 50-50 is for me to have the Lisa Jones dog and pony show that goes off as a personal brand to shine my light like Oprah does back on Shecom. So if I can be on stages as Lisa Jones, as a media expert, as a keynote speaker, as a podcast host, that then brings attention back to what we do at Shecom, but they don't impinge on each other. So Shecom could get sold at some point and I still have the Lisa Jones personal brand. And that is what I think a lot of business owners don't do well. I think a lot of people, and I deliberately say, like, you are not your business. And your business isn't you. So take that business out of your mushy stomach space where we all shove everything as women. Take it out of there and make it its own business. It sits on its own. It should spin on its own without me. And I test that all the time by taking holidays. And I put an acting CEO in place and the team go to that person, not me. It's really important to me that the business, if I got hit by a bus tomorrow, I know my business would continue to scale. It's not hinging on me.
Really important, I think, for a lot of us to think about early for the brands that we build. How do they exist beyond us and what sort of impact can they make? I think that's, really interesting share.
And I just want to be clear, though, like it also depends in the same way I said that it's everybody's choice to be in a small business or not. It may not be for everybody. It's also everybody's choice to decide what their version of success looks like and what their when will you reach success? So for me, success with Shecom is 3 or 4 years from now when I sell the whole company and exit and then go on to be on boards and be a keynote speaker. And that's hopefully my semi-retirement place. And But other people may choose to say, I only ever want to stay in Shecom because it's my everything and I want to run it forever and gift it to my child. Like everybody has a different version of success. But I think it's very important that we analyze and question ourselves on what success looks like, because otherwise the risk is that we run forever like it's a marathon, and we, or even worse, that it's a sprint and we literally kill ourselves, never knowing if we've achieved that version of success because we're not clear what success looks like. It's very dangerous. I see that a lot too, where they then become so separated from why they started the business in the first place that they haven't got any clear idea of why they do what they do every day.
It's very true. And this is why it's so important to have a variety of inputs and look at a variety of stories and not just the one model of success that gets presented in so many forums is that this plus this plus this equals this. Do it just like I did. It's like take 1% from this person, 5% from this person, and then a whole lot of what you're feeling internally. That's, I really like that thinking.
Completely agree.
What's the thing that's kept you hungry over all of these years and, even keeping you holding that vision for your own personal brand and then the vision of boards and everything that's to come next?
It's a deeply personal piece for me around being in a domestic violence marriage, and I'll come to why this relates to my version of success. But I found myself in a marriage that was really ugly, but building businesses. And at a certain point, I had been, as often exists in domestic violence marriages, separated from my family. My mum wasn't speaking to me for a few years, which she was prior to that my best friend and is again now. So there's a lot of separation that takes place when you're in a marriage with somebody who's a narcissistic sociopath. And for me, that looked like isolated from friends and family and support. My income was entirely reliant upon our companies that we co-ran, many times of which there was no spare money at all for me to move out to separate from him. So I had my back against a wall for many years and felt very trapped and isolated. And I have a 13 and a half year old daughter, and I literally am driven by the concept that I have to make enough money to financially secure her future. For me, what that looks like, and I literally shared this with my husband on the weekend, like it looks to me like I buy her a house that sits in a trust so that no partner can ever take that from her, but it's hers in her own entirety forever, so that she never has to be stuck in a relationship where she has no choices. And I always say that the old adage of money doesn't buy happiness is complete and utter bullshit, and said by somebody who's never had their back in a corner, because you're right in the sense that money in itself doesn't buy happiness, but money buys choices. And when we have choices, we can find happiness because choices allows us to move through life thinking that we've got options. But when you have no options, it's a really ugly place to be. So I'm very driven for my businesses to be financially successful so that I have financial freedom. And the financial freedom is, sure, it's selfishly for me as well. And my husband, I've just retired him from his career. He's now our house husband. That's an entirely other story, which is both wonderful and awful, coming out of, a long naval career with PTSD. But it's amazing for us because he's born to be my support crew, and it feels really beautiful between us. So I now have the responsibility of being our main breadwinner at home. And so for me, the financial freedom that comes from business success is to be able to afford us an incredible retirement period, which hopefully will start in a few years from now in my 50s. But it's to have security for my daughter. And that was a long story, but I feel it needs to be said, is that that version for me is so different to anybody else's, but it's deeply true for me that I need to have that version of success so that my daughter never feels or never gets stuck in the same place I was.
I really generous share again. Thank you. And I just have so much passion to talk about money because, people get so weird talking about money or being publicly aspirational to be wealthy in whatever form wealth takes for the individual. But like exactly you say, money gives options. And, whether, you're making an impact on your family's life, an impact on the world, an impact on others, like whatever the impact is, whatever you want to see for the world in which you live in, our small circle and around us, can't do that without wealth. We have to make money and we got to go get paid. Like, go get your money. It is so very, very important. And, we have to fight the ick all the time when it comes to talking about why it is that we want to build wealth and how we go about it and find that ability in the moment to prioritize that for why we want to have it.
I think a lot of people have a bad relationship with money. I think it comes from our parents, it's generational. It comes from our upbringings and schooling and a whole bunch of projections of everybody else all over us when we're young. And then we grow up with our own insecurities around money. And then if you add to that the idea that we've had an unstable income being self-employed, it can be a really complex topic to broach. And I think, certainly I've even this year had those 4 a.m. wake ups in absolute fear of not having enough money. And it's a really, really distasteful, horrible thing to experience. But I practice, for me, it's a nightly routine for me. I've got a beautiful set of affirmation cards next to my bed, and my one at the moment talks about, money comes to me easily, and a lot of it. And I practice this idea every night that money is already coming towards me, and it's easy to attract it, and it's easy to keep it. And I've stopped trying to associate that money is complicated or difficult, and I get really cross with women in particular, but anyone that talk about lack of money, not us personally, but generally speaking. I mean, I have an economics degree, and people make a lot of money in recessions, and in even extreme recessionary periods in times of war, there are still people who profiteer from it. And so I really despair of the idea of people going, oh, it's tough out there right now. And I think bullshit. Bullshit. I don't buy into that whatsoever. What I do think is that lazy people buy into that concept, or people who lack, and I don't mean lazy in a really critical way. I just mean people who are not hungry, who don't want to pivot on the edge of a toenail, or who don't want success deeply. They can fall into the idea of blaming the current economy, that there aren't enough sales. And look, I've got so many clients who are 100% up year on year. We just did the numbers. We track our numbers deeply at SheCom, and we are on the 7th day of a month and right now, and we are 832% up on the same week last year. Now, last month we landed about 82% up in general, month on year. But we just had a chuckle because my finance chick, she gets off on this every day of like, what are we this day, this month compared to this day last year at this point in the month? And yesterday was the highest it's ever been. It's 832% up. And I've got clients who are 100% up year on year, like 10 million a year revenue last year, 20 million a year revenue this year. That's in 1 year, that growth. Like, it's totally fucking possible. There is so much money out there, and all you have to do is queue at Mecca on a Saturday to see. It can take half an hour to get to the cash register of things nobody actually needs, but that we aspire or want, to recognize that there is plenty of money out there. You just have to be savvy enough to figure out how to get it to the channel to deviate away from everybody else's rivers and into your bank account. And so, yes, I don't subscribe to lack mentality whatsoever.
Oh, I love that. I absolutely, yes, love that. And I do understand, as you would too, with so many we speak, that there is, an element that comes into this journey with money that we have where we maybe feel the temptation to go, it's tough out there. It's, da, da, da. A lot of that comes from that trust in self, or that self-belief, or that deep-seated worthiness that sometimes takes a little bit of work. I think that if we've ever found ourselves saying those words or feeling that way, that maybe there's just something going on where we want to self-sabotage a little bit, like unconsciously. And that also takes such a big amount of work. But hearing things like that is so important, as that reminder that, yes, it's out there and we can do, and we deserve it.
Oh, look, and it's our job as business owners. And also, for me, I'm a leader. I lead 36 people every day, and then thousands and thousands of clients. I lead them, and it's my job as a leader to show up every day in the best version of myself. And that takes work and commitment, to have days where I want to fucking crumble, but not allow myself to do that, but to stay in the position of leading, which is to uplift and inspire others. It's to show gratitude when I see people do great jobs. One of my favorite things at SheCom is almost weekly, I send random flowers to team members. Nobody else knows that I do it. We don't publicly say, well, we're sending flowers to Sam this week, like, it doesn't happen like that. But we do, I randomly send gifts, unexpected gifts or gift vouchers to my team all the time to say thank you. So I practice this idea that I show gratitude to those who I feel need just to lift up this week. And I also will ask people to step up to their KPIs and to follow SOPs and to be part of a process and an engine that has purpose. And I feel like it's my job as a leader to be all of those things. So if I despaired in the corner and, oh, whoa, it's terrible out there, I couldn't lead anybody in that space. They would all run away and get jobs elsewhere. Like, that's not leading a team or a set of clients. And so it's as CEO, that's my job. I have to be that person. So I have to get my shit together, is how I approach it.
I can't help but think back to the Lisa who was sitting in corporate land and dreaming of banh mi's and, all of the deliciousness of the idea of a Vietnamese restaurant. And then, all the businesses you've had since, of course, your big brands, the work in the solar space, what you're doing with SheCom, all of that. Like, that's quite the journey. Thinking about all of that, if you can summarize, what would you say to that Lisa who was on her pen and paper doing a little sneaky MVP or a bit of planning? What would you tell her?
Look, it's really interesting. I rarely think back on that kind of question, but asking me now, I would just say that the journey won't be easy, but it'll be rich. And it's okay, just follow the flow, kid, because it would be really easy for me to look back on my domestic violence marriage or my building multiple multi-million dollar companies inside of that marriage. As you have mentioned, we haven't even talked about Eco Originals, which was my massive eco nappy brand I built and sold and exited. But all of those things, there are aspects of those journeys that are complete and utter failures. But they also brought me the richness and they made me the person that I am today. And the empathy and the kindness I feel towards others now is an extension of what I've been through as part of my journey. And I wouldn't change any of it, as kind of maybe fucked up that sounds. I honestly wouldn't. It's all served to make my life more diverse, and I have a greater empathy and understanding of others now because of the experiences that I've had in this life. And I think it's about trusting the journey, and I'm sure my journey is far from over. I'm sure there are more obstacles and hurdles and challenges coming, there is more beauty and great holidays and, the satisfaction of buying a home this year and renovating it and doing, gardening projects. That has brought me untold satisfaction. It's the simplest thing to buy your own home after renting for a really long time and to deeply put down roots of ripping walls out and building out big veggie gardens and sitting there at sunset with my husband watching our sprinkler system water our seedlings growing. Like, I can't even tell you how deeply satisfying that is. That is pretty much a bigger high than any of the things I've got in other parts of my life. So everything is a richness that brings joy in the quiet moments if you listen to them. That's what I would say.
Light, shade, journey, all of that, how it, the growth comes back to the simple. It is just, it's a big picture. It's a big picture. So yeah, I think there's many of us that can take aspects of that into, whatever it is we need to do after this podcast stops playing to take those tiny steps forward to keep going and growing and getting through it. Lisa, I expected today to be a really enlightening conversation, but I'm, really grateful that you went there with me on a few spaces and let me in and let the listener into, parts of your world. And that is such a gift to give to others, to place the realistic filter over the top, to tell it how it is, to inspire, and also to, to acknowledge and nurture the fact that it's hard and it's scary and it's a lot of things, but it's all of those great things at once. And it's a huge gift to give. In return, what can we give back to you? How can we support you to keep growing SheCom and keep fulfilling your dreams?
Oh, thank you. I want to say that it took me a very long time to even publicly say that I was in a domestic violence marriage. It's not a journey that a lot of people will share. There's fear around, retaliation even now, all kinds of things, because I co-parent a child with him. But I think the gift is in our vulnerability, we allow others to be vulnerable too. And that's what I've learned is the greatest gift in me being brave enough to share my story publicly. What I would love is for people to come and follow me and join if we can help anybody inside of our incredible mentoring programs. The skill and the care that I've taken and hopefully shared on the podcast today, we take incredible care with our clients in our mentoring programs. And if I can help anybody on their journey over at SheCom, we run Bali retreats and we deeply support 50 women every time we go to Bali. And that's with me for a week. We have spots left in our February Bali retreat, but also over at SheCom in our coaching programs. We'd love to help and support women. So come follow us on Instagram, DM us on Instagram and ask any questions and we can help people in any way that they need to show up in their business.
Beautiful. Oh, tell you, I miss Bali. It's been a few years. That would be amazing. I'm going to make that really easy for the listener, of course, by putting all the links exactly where you would expect them down on your phone on the episode in the show notes. Scroll down to the bottom of the show notes. You'll see the link there to go check it out, follow, scroll the website, get involved. Lisa, it has been an absolute pleasure to connect with you and to hear your story today. Thank you for sharing it with me.
Thanks, Kim, for a wonderful chat.
Thank you for listening to Unemployed and Afraid, the podcast for small business builders with your host, me, Kim Curtin. If you love it, you can say thanks with a star rating and a review. And of course, join the community on Instagram, TikTok, Facebook, and LinkedIn. Find us at Unemployed and Afraid wherever you're hanging out, and I'll see you there.